Welcome to another episode of Tax Leaders Unplugged. Our guest today is Sandra Esteves, and Sandra is the head of tax at Talend, technology company that got acquired by Qlik. And before, Sandra was in a tax leadership role at Sabic and worked in advisory for Deloitte and EY in Portugal. She's also a TEI EMEA board member, and on top of that, chairs the TEI Direct Tax Committee. And she's a course instructor at IBFD and is based in Amsterdam. In this episode, we will discuss what it takes to go through an M&A process as a tax function and lessons that can be learned knowing that M&A activity is at an all-time high. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you, Stevie. Nice to be here.
Sandra, tell us a bit outside of tax. What are your hobbies and interests that listeners won't know about?
Well, I have hobbies. I have a bit of a nerdy hobby, which we get to talk a bit more at the end. So one of my hobbies is actually Tax Executives Institute. That's something I do on the side. It is tax related, but I enjoy it.
That's one of the first things you said, tax is my hobby.
Yeah, it is a bit of a hobby. It can be time consuming, but it is something I enjoy doing.
That's great to hear because I think that's the passion that hopefully most of us have and brings us to work every day and enjoy working and learning and making progress. I see that you started your career in advisory in Portugal. What inspired you to move to the Netherlands? Tell us about that journey.
It was different things that played a role there. One was just curiosity, living abroad. How is it having that experience of being outside your country, interacting with different cultures, people, ways of thinking? So that played an important role. It was also a professional decision. As you mentioned, I started working with Big Four. Many of us do that at the start of their tax careers. I like getting stuff done. There weren't many opportunities to work in-house, so the Netherlands was like a kindergarten because you have a lot of multinationals headquartered here, right? And you do get the opportunity then to join a large multinational with a tax function and just be part of a journey that you don't get to be part of when you're working in tax advisory. So definitely that played an important role. And I think my partner moved here, so it was also a family decision. And when we were taking a decision, we took the decision also as a couple, as a family. And that brought us here. And it's a decision I think I don't regret, nor does he.
That's good to hear. Did you encounter cultural differences or anything remarkable when you started living in the Netherlands compared to where you lived before?
Yeah.
Things you adapted to?
Oh, okay. I always try to absorb the best of the culture, and I think the best, there's two things that I learned to appreciate, okay, in the Netherlands, or maybe three. One is the directness. Portuguese are more indirect. The Dutch are far more direct, as you probably know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
to the point that for someone that comes from Portugal, you may sound rude.
Yeah.
But that's something you learn, and definitely you learn to appreciate. Something I enjoy is it's a far more flat way of working. You sit down, you talk, you collaborate. Everybody, there's less of a hierarchy, and that's nice because it makes the person who's talking makes you feel more listened, if I can put it like that. So that
Yeah.
it's not as top down. It's kind of you discuss and then you get to an agreement, you get it done. That was good to experience also, and I take it on board on the things that I do. And then I think the last thing is just the way of living, the cycling everywhere, the way the city is built, the work-life balance and the quality of living is something that, yeah, you get spoiled and you really get used to it very quickly.
The reference to I think you said the flat way of
Yeah,
relationships. It immediately reminds you about horizontal monitoring, right?
true.
Is it just playing in the back of your mind or not at all?
No, he actually wasn't playing in the back of my mind.
Yeah, if we stay in our topic, I mean, that is what it is supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
So not having the hierarchical, vertical relationship, but more like the horizontal. Yeah. So that's what it sparked in my head, but maybe not immediately what you were referring to.
Now, my head was outside of tax on this one, and just how literally, from a cultural perspective, you see
Yeah.
differences between countries.
Yeah. But it's in any case, I guess, the best thing to do what you just said, like trying to see the positive aspects of every culture, and that will drive you to get adapted to it.
Yeah.
So I like that a lot. I was looking at your LinkedIn page as preparation for our conversation, and I saw a quote on the page, which I will read out here for the audience. If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable. Can you explain a bit why you have selected that one and why you put it on LinkedIn?
Yeah. I'm a curious person and like to explore things. Um, when you do that, even within tax or in my work, that can take you places you didn't expect you would land there. So that sentence is a bit like a compass to make sure, hey, you got to this place. Do you want to continue and explore going down that path? Or do you, Sandra, want to go back and stick to what you were doing? And I think it's profound in the sense that it helps me guide where I want to go in my career. It's also practical because maybe you went down a path looking at a tax issue that you're just overthinking. So, do you really want to go there or do you want to go back and keep it practical? So, it's like a mantra that I use to make sure that I'm focused on what I actually have to do and balanced on is it something that I'm enjoying doing, you know?
Can you give an example of how you apply curiosity in your day-to-day professional tax life?
Ooh, that is a good question. I think one of the places where I apply more curiosity in my day to day is in learning of the business and how the business can impact tax.
Yeah.
It's not about kind of pushing tax down or putting tax higher in the agenda of the business. It's really about trying to understand how the business works. And from a tax perspective, how can we help add value to the bottom line? In a nutshell,
Yeah.
keep compliant, add value to the bottom line. When you do that, what I've experienced over time is I really enjoy the business part. And for me, it's so interesting that I can go into a spiral where I just want to learn more and more and more and more and more and more and more, and then start losing track of the impact. Where is it that I can help? It's finding that balance between knowing what is relevant to support with the tax advice and the curiosity of wanting to learn more for the sake of knowing more of how it works. You know, that's definitely one of the areas that, yeah, that I enjoy the most and I'm the most curious about also.
Let's go to the main topic for today, going through M&A as an in-house tax function. So your company Talend got acquired by Qlik around 2 years
Yeah.
ago. And as I said, M&A activity is in general going up. So I assume that more and more people in tax will go through something similar at a certain point in their career. It's a very interesting topic to have a discussion about. Tell us a bit about the process and the overall experience you had while being acquired.
So on the process itself, it was easier than other acquisitions. It was easier in the sense that both Qlik as well as Talent were owned by the same private equity. So we had a common shareholder. Okay. So that made it smoother. Okay. The second thing that made it smoother was that from a business perspective, it was a business opportunity, mainly because Talent and Qlik's technology are they complement each other. Talent is
Yeah.
more on the data integration, has like a data trust score, making sure that the data you're using is reliable. Qlik is on the data analytics and the data intelligence. So it was like, oh, now we have an end-to-end solution. It made perfect
Yep.
sense, not just for the two companies, because it represents a growth opportunities for the two, but obviously also for the shareholder. It doesn't mean that, although it was smoother, it doesn't mean we shortcut it on the steps, right? So we did have a due diligence, and that's definitely one of the most interesting parts, if I can put it like that, when you're on the side of the company being acquired, because it's it's the decisions and the actions that you took while you were leading the tax function. They become scrutinized, right? How, yeah, all your compliance, all your tax structuring, all your opportunities, they are reviewed during the due diligence, and you get asked the why questions. But overall, it was a good process, very collaborative given the position we were in. What made it special was that at the time of the acquisition, there were external circumstances that dictated that Talend would be required to operate as standalone entities. So we literally had to continue operating for almost for up to the end of 2023 to continue operating as two different companies, you know. So in the due diligence phase, that was not relevant, if I can put it like that. But as you're going through the structuring of the acquisition and planning of the integration, it played an important role. Normally, what multinationals do in an M&A is you go through your due diligence, you acquire the company, and you kick off the synergies that result from the integration, right? That kind of
Yep.
follows in steps, and you integrate, of course. Here, between Talend and Qlik went through the diligence. We completed the acquisition in May 2023, and then it was a bit like a hold because we still need to operate like two standalone groups. We look at the low-hanging fruit, mainly coming from business synergies, how we leverage having an end-to-end solution while continuing to operate as two independent companies. But the true integration of the companies, let's call it the legal integration, didn't kick off until the beginning of 2024. That made it somewhat different.
You put a spotlight on the due diligence phase. Is there anything the audience can do? Imagine we have multiple heads of tax in the audience. They are not having any indications of an M&A process whatsoever. Is there anything as a head of tax you can do to prepare for that, knowing that potentially one day there could be an acquisition and you will be in that challenging due diligence? Is there anything you want to share?
Yeah, may sound a cliche, but the first thing is be in control. You know, it wasn't like I had started at Talend a long time ago. I joined Talend June, July 2021 in the middle of COVID, right? And 2 years later, I went through an acquisition, which was interesting. Maybe it was pure luck. I don't know. One of the things that I did put a dashboard in place. I had a monthly review with the CFO on a couple of key items, kind of, are your filings on time? What are your risk positions? And what are your tax liabilities? How does your controversy look like? What are your cash taxes? What are your cash opportunities? What are the tax attributes that we have within the group?
Was this the CFO or you spontaneously installing that dashboard and monitoring yourself?
That was me spontaneously because I joined the company, right? And I and I didn't really have kind of and there wasn't a dashboard in place. There wasn't an overview of where we were in terms of our compliance and our control framework. So I kicked it off also to understand kind of where were we? What does that mean from resource requirements? What does that mean from a priority perspective? So that helped me with a couple of decisions in my first 6 months. Having that was a good place to start in the due diligence phase. The second thing that was really helpful in the due diligence phase, and then as we kicked off the structuring of the acquisition and later the integration, was knowing the business. Maybe because my background is international tax transfer pricing, knowing the business was something that kind of, yeah, I did throughout my career. Kind of the fact that I knew the business and how the business was organized, how it was done, how the transactions looked like, not just within the group for the transfer pricing, but also towards kind of the third parties. That was really helpful as we were going through the structuring and then the subsequent integration of the two businesses. That that was those were my two big anchors.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And is practical advice for the audience, getting to know the business, I think even outside of M&A is super crucial. Maybe one question, any recommendations, what you typically do to get to know the business? Should you join their lunches, invite them for lunch, visit the plants? What are typical things that you would recommend to get the best understanding of your business?
I started in the middle of COVID, so I couldn't travel anywhere. Everything you said is valid. I started having virtual cups of coffee. I still do that today because you just sit down virtually. You block 15 minutes in the calendars of people that are busy normally, right?
Yeah.
And I think the first thing I try to get to know the person, what drives that individual, what is important for that person, build some rapport, some good chemistry during those 15 minutes, and not sounding like I'm just trying to squeeze more stuff into his or her calendar, but really interested in learning what they have to say. From there, build it further. For a long time, because we were in a COVID lockdown and we have a lot of remote roles within the organization. So I try to stay in contact with those roles.
What were some of the challenges you experienced during the process? Due diligence you mentioned, but any other challenges that stood out as a tax function being the target, the acquired company?
Honest big picture going through an acquisition and being in the acquired position, key challenges that you face are things like you lose sponsorship, right? When you're part of an organization, you have your pipeline of sponsors as tax function. When you go through an acquisition and integration, a lot of your sponsors leave the organization, right? So there's a lot of loss there. You lose support in a nutshell from not you lose support. That's not the network you relied on exits the organization. There's no simpler way of putting it. And what are the critical things that you dive into, it becomes harder to spot. There's a part linked to tough decisions that have to be taken, right? I mentioned before, when you go through an integration, you lose your sponsors. Your previous sponsors aren't there anymore. It's not just your
Yeah.
sponsors that you lose. You also see a lot of colleagues departing the company.
Yeah.
That requires you as a leader and an individual to also find a balance, right? A balance of, hey, yeah, an emotional balance, if I can put it like that, because it's easier to go through, it's easier to be at a company in a growing phase. It's harder to go through a process where you see many people in the organization exiting, right? So,
Yeah. In such a situation where there is an acquisition and then maybe partly duplication of the tax function and some people being required to leave, what is then the best thing to do? Focus on, for example, communication towards people that are staying and ensuring that they get all the ins and outs and maybe the future opportunity as well. Anything you want to share there? Any first-hand experience?
yeah, I think the best thing is to um, be honest and transparent, especially when it's your team on the line,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Makes
Yeah,
sense. I get it.
then that's I think. There's some tough conversations that you have. Of course, there's some tough decisions that you also need to take. Just that openness of being transparent. Yeah, those are.
Yeah, and I guess that applies even outside of M&A because we live in challenging macroeconomic times as well.
Yeah,
So sometimes hard decisions are forced on us towards our teams. I like transparency and honesty.
yeah.
That is very, very, very true. Last question maybe about M&A. So imagine you will be head of tax in new company in the future. Maybe not, but say that you move on to a next role. You go for an M&A heavy industry, or would you be like, whoa, no, I'm going to avoid M&A at any times in a new role? Does it drive you? Is it energizing you, or anything you want to share?
Interesting question. More than thinking, is this company a potential target for, is the role challenging? And if the company does go through an M&A, so if it potentially gets acquired, what are the things that I need to get ready for? Within,
Yeah,
not it's a bit more like, does the role allow you to grow and learn? That's what I'm thinking. Okay. And how is it that you can make a difference in that role? If the company gets acquired, I think a couple of things can happen. Is it will always happen that what you do is the legacy you leave behind. So if you do it well, you can tap yourself in the back. It means if the company you work for gets acquired, the way you led tax can be seen as a reference by the company that is effectively acquiring. So it's how you take the best out of the experience that you have and not think that, oh, in a year's time, I may lose my job because this company is going to get acquired. What is the experience that you can take away? Because if it's positive and good references, that's the best thing you can have.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, you're also a course instructor at IBFD. I'm a big IBFD fan. I've been there plenty of times in Amsterdam for back then while I was in-house in-person trainings. I really enjoyed it always, like the trainings of typically a couple of days up to a week. Always good experiences there. But for yourself, explain us a bit like what do you do there as a course instructor and why do you do it?
What do I do as a course instructor?
Yes,
I,
tell us a bit.
mostly what I do is I try to share experiences. Being at the
Mhm.
IBFD is a great opportunity. People think you go there as a course instructor. And the way I look at it is there's things that I've had the opportunity to learn at work. How can I help other tax professionals learn from the experience that I've had? It's one way that I look at it. And then there's a layer on top of that. That is what I really, really enjoy also, is when I go there, there's always questions that people ask that I don't anticipate. Other experienced tax professionals that are sitting there and have their own experiences. So I always leave with a lot more than what I started in those sessions. And that kind of reciprocity that you get just being there, it's something that I find priceless. I really enjoy.
It's probably linking back to your appetite for curiosity, bringing it back to you want to learn as much
Yeah,
as you can. People that come to your training, then you are educating them, right?
I'm hoping they leave with more than they come in.
Yeah.
So, kind of going back, the IBFD is about technical learning. What I like about the IBFD is that where the sessions are, and I've been teaching at the IBFD since 2014, if I recall correctly. What I
Yeah.
like about it is how in those sessions we as in-house tax professionals bridge the technical with hands-on experience, because that's something you don't always get.
Knowing that you You have been there for a while. How do you see the scene evolving? Typically, looking at the audience you have in the classes you are giving, what are some of the changes you see over, say, the last decade? Because the world is changing rapidly. New technologies, macroeconomics under pressure, and geopolitically changing. We had like remote ways of working pushed upon us. How is this impacting your in-house tax experience? Any trends you see in general? Any, like if you look at the typical tax profile you see in front of you today compared to 10 years ago, is there something you see differently?
What I see is a bigger appetite to understand how things get done, okay, and why in-house you get stuff done in a certain way. A lot of the questions that I get are geared toward understanding not just what is the technical background, but also why things are done a certain way. Maybe that's just my way of looking at it.
What I hear if I talk to tax people and if I compare how things have evolved, one of the observations I have, and I'm curious what you think about it, is that when I started my career in tax, compliance was the most boring part. The tax advisory team was on a different floor than the tax compliance team. We were separated and it felt like different worlds. Fast forward to where we are today. It's all about data. It's all about connecting everything nicely into the compliance. It's all getting more system integrated. And then the tax authority is also being on top of their game, knowing a lot more about the taxpayer than it used to be before. So all of this elevating, I think, the importance of compliance. And I hear more that teams properly invest in it. It's not a necessary evil anymore that they want to leave in the hands of the local teams. They want to be in control. They want to connect the dots, have the insights. That's more what I hear. Curious if that resonates or whether you say that for me, it has always been like that. It's a no-brainer.
I think it's always been like that. And didn't make a distinction between like what you mentioned, a first class and a second class tax team. I think compliance has always been very important. The difference is the complexity of compliance puts compliance further in the spotlight. That's
Yeah.
okay. And the second thing is the impact of compliance. You don't want to have everything in the control of the local teams. I want to have a central global team that oversees, right? You do have that extra layer is you have local compliance, but with pillar 2, you need a central view and control over the impact that that additional layer of compliance is going to have on your tax bill, right?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I tend to agree. Maybe if we finish
Yeah.
up the conversation here with your TEI background, we have had other guests already on the podcast that have active roles
Yeah.
in TEI in different regions. So I'm always curious to understand what drives you to take up such a function. You have an active role in it. So maybe explain what you do and what drives you. What do you get out of it?
Yeah, there's two things that drives me within TEI. So TEI stands for Tax Executives Institute. It's an organization of in-house tax professionals only. We're kind of a selective group that has 6,000 members. 300 of those are based here in EMEA. What I get from TEI are basically two things. It's such a powerful networking organization. The fact that I can kind of grab my phone or open my Outlook and drop one of my colleagues an email just saying, hey, I'm having this issue. Have you seen anything like it?
Yeah.
How do you get it done? Or that I can jump into a call. Because I chair the direct tax committee, we have monthly calls where we come together with an agenda and without agenda, and we can just ask the question and hear what others have to share. That's something fantastic. If you sit alone in your silo and think through something, you lose the experience others have had and they can enrich what you're doing. Networking is definitely something that drives me. I try to nurture that within TI. The second thing I appreciate is the technical and advocacy. I like the forward thinking in a certain way. As multinationals, you don't always get a voice, you don't always get to influence. DEI becomes powerful because we bring together different members with different backgrounds from different multinationals, different industries, and the advocacy that we do is fantastic. We're privileged to do advocacy with the OECD, with the EU, and with the United Nations, because we have different members that also leverage from their networks with those organizations to put forward not just the agenda that they have for the company they work for, but to help out put forward the agenda of kind of different members in the organization. That's a fantastic experience, being able to influence the voice of companies,
Yeah, I liked it a lot and resonates a lot. Like the closer you can get to the policy making, the better the policies will be because they will be aligned to what businesses need. Makes a lot of sense. And I find it impressive that you can combine this with an in-house tax role because to what you're saying, it's advocacy at OECD, EU, UN level. Quite some prep work probably goes into that. So I'm always wondering like how can you combine that with a full-time in-house role?
Yeah, because you don't do it alone. I don't do advocacy with the OECD, EU, or the UN. We have different members who have that network and that opportunity. Monique, she sits at the UN TP committee, right? So she's a fantastic voice that also gets to represent TEI. That's brilliant. We have another colleague, Ralph, he sits at the EU platform for tax good governance. That's a fantastic voice for TEI and for the members. I do advocacy with the OECD, Working Party 1 and Working Party 6 on transfer pricing and working from anywhere. It's not like I come up with everything that goes in there. There's a group of people that contribute. That makes it interesting because we learn from each other and it makes it manageable. You can have a day job and still do those things.
Sounds interesting. I already saw some of the outcomes you achieved. I keep an eye on your LinkedIn. It's impressive. Sandra, we are by the end of the podcast, the conversation, and I typically ask one more question. It's the same question to all of the guests I've had so far. And the question is, what is one piece of advice that you would offer to tax professionals looking to get the most out of their career? Maybe one day want to be in your shoes.
I would leave everybody with two thoughts. One thought, how do you grow and how do you measure success? So I would start there because growth, as I've learned throughout my career, growth doesn't necessarily come by going up the ladder and going up the ladder quick. Growth these days, given the complexity of tax, can actually come from you having different experiences within tax because tax is so complex these days that you can either just decide to become a specialist in one topic, or you can, if you have that opportunity, you can take the decision to do lateral moves that allow you to learn different things within tax. And today, actually, that's for me, that's a piece of advice I wish I had had earlier in my career, or that I had learned earlier in my career. So I think that drives the second thought. And the second thought is managing your career. Kind of think what is the balance that is working for you. Is the balance that you really want to become a specialist in a topic, and that's the path that you follow? Or are you looking for kind of becoming more of a generalist? Regardless of the path that you choose, the route to becoming a head of tax is always there, or the opportunity to become a head of tax is always there. It's about what you decide to do to get there, you know? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
So you say you can become head of tax in multiple ways, either through the specialist path and then learn more at the top to become more acquainted with the other
Yeah,
parts outside
definitely.
specialism, or the generalist path, right? There are, in any case, multiple ways. It resonates with me because I see heads of tax with different backgrounds and degrees of specialism. Is there any preference you personally have?
I think because I'm curious, I like the path of experimenting different things. Okay.
Yeah.
If I was a recruiter or in a recruiter position, would that play a difference? Probably it would, just because it gives the recruiter more comfort that you have had a broader experience with different matters of tax. Just What I also think is that looking at it like that, you're excluding something that maybe that's a third piece of advice that I should have mentioned is I don't like calling in your skill set. Okay. It's how you develop yourself as a leader. Maybe that's the best way to put it, you know, develop yourself as a leader that kind of can navigate complexity.
So I think navigating the complexity, that's our day-to-day job, right? If you as a leader can illustrate the path that the rest should take, makes a lot of sense. So no, I like it a lot, the different pieces you shared and the conversation. So thanks a lot for this, Sandra. It was very interesting. Thanks a lot, and we'll see each other later.
See you soon. Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.